All right, now the most important thing is, and I apologize for the busyness of this slide, I leave it to you to read the slide by itself because it contains a lot of information, but the important feature that you need to keep in mind is you can't just raise money from everybody. Friends and family, you have to make sure that you understand that people actually are friends and family. You can't just make it up. Now there's some evidence that friends and family firms and that stay with friends and family funding for too long actually do substantially worse than those that receive, so for instance, funding from an angel investor. You can see why, right? Friends and family are usually not the most critical. They may be more supportive, and therefore, there's a higher chance that your product or idea is actually not as good as you think that it is. Whereas an angel investor who has to use their own funds for making an investment in you, they're usually having a much closer eye whether or not what you do actually is something that makes sense and that can earn the money in the long run. Now, venture capitalist firm is usually something much more complicated. Usually these are funds that collect money for a particular purpose. Once the money is collected, they're invested in a series of small companies, of startup companies, and eventually, there's an end time for this fund, at which point, all of the investments either get rolled over into a different fund, they're sold to a private equity firm, or there's some other way of exit, right? So that the investors can get their money back. Right. Now, one thing that is interesting that I want to mention to you is the so-called exempt market. Now, the exempt market is a market for a particular type of investor. These are referred to as accredited investors. Now, these are people that are outside of the friends and family. Usually these are people who are either high net worth, so they're wealthy, or they're high income. So for instance, a requirement is they have to have an income of over $200,000. They have to have wealth, non-leveraged, in excess of $1 million. So housing wealth is a leveraged wealth usually. Usually these are limited partners, or these are already angel investors. So now you can find these people, but it's actually a pretty elaborate process. In fact, you have to go as an investor. You have to be approved, usually from an exempt dealer, and so the process of getting approved is cumbersome. The questionnaire that people have to fill out is something on the order of 95 pages long. So it's a really, really tricky and long-lasting process. But the amount of money that is being raised in the exempt market is quite large. Now, this is what we have in Ontario, and usually, per year, something over $200 billion is raised in the exempt market. Broadly speaking, this includes VC funds, private equity, and a large number of investments. About 10% of that is true, genuine retail investor for accredited investors, if you want.